All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. Now, I'm going to keep the final project open just as a reference so that I can point to you guys, like when I'm creating the HTML and CSS, I can show you exactly what I'm doing in the final project. And like I said in the last video, a lot of times you'll get the design beforehand and you'll just have to use it as a reference and create the HTML and CSS. So we'll kind of take that approach. And I'm also going to, for now, have the browser and the text editor open at the same time. I don't like how narrow this is, but at the same time, I want you to see them both. Okay. If we get to a point where we're creating stuff like this and it doesn't look good when it's this narrow, then I'll make it bigger. Okay. So first thing we want to do is create a project folder. So you can put that anywhere in your system. I'm going to go to my desktop and I'm just going to call this folder, let's do hotel_website. And we can open this in VS Code. So let's say open folder and we want hotel website. Okay, it's completely empty. And I'm going to create, first of all, a folder for our images. And you can call this images, or IMG is another common convention. So I'm going to use that. And then we want to get all the image resources that you downloaded in the first video of this section, which I have right here. And we want to put those into our IMG folder. So let's go ahead and select all these and bring them into IMG. Oops, what happened? There we go. All right, so now that those are in there, we can close these up and go back into VS Code. And now you can see I have all the images here. So next thing we'll do is create our page structure. As you can see, we have 3 pages: home, about, and contact. Now remember, in the beginning of the HTML basics section, I said that when you have a home page of a website, you need to call it index.html, because when you go to something whatever.com, it's going to look for that file as the home page. So let's say index.html as a new file. I clicked this icon. And we might as well create the rest of the HTML pages. So we'll do HTML about HTML.html. Let's do contact.html. Okay, and we're also going to need our CSS, our style sheet, and we're not going to be putting our CSS in the HTML like we did in the sandbox. I only did that for convenience. When you have a project, you want to create separate style sheets. And generally, you want a separate folder that contains those. So I'm going to click this folder icon and create a folder called CSS. Okay, and then inside there, I'm going to create a new file called style.css. And the name style it doesn't matter what you call this, but style, main.css, these are common conventions for main style sheets, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so now that we have that, that's basically our website structure. So we're going to head into the index.html. We can close up about and contact for now, but let's open up our style sheet as well. So we have these 2 files open. And let's generate our head body tags. So exclamation enter tab. And we'll change the title here to, let's say, Hotel BT. And usually you'll have like some kind of separator, like a dash or a pipe character. And then if you're focused on search engines, like you want to rank for, let's say, Boston Hotel, you might put something like that here, as long as it makes sense. But we're just going to put welcome because it's the home page. Okay, and you'll probably want to put some meta tags in here, like description. I'm not going to do this for every project we create, but I'll do it for this one just because it's the first. So let's say name description, and let's do content equals, and then I'll just say welcome to the most extraordinary hotel in Boston, Massachusetts. So that's our description. Let's do another meta tag. This will be our keywords. So we want to do name equals keywords. And for the content, you'd probably do something like hotel, whatever the location. So something like Boston Hotel, New England Hotel, and whatever it may be, whatever keywords describe this page. All right, now in addition to that, we want to link our style sheet. So we use a link tag, and if I use Emmet, if I do link enter or link tab, it'll automatically put in the rel attribute. So the rel is going to be equal to style sheet because we're just telling it that we're importing a style sheet here, a CSS file. And then in the href, we want to point to that file. Now remember, we put it inside of a folder called CSS, so we want to say css/style.css. Okay, and then we can get started with the body here. Now, it's important to mention that everyone has their own style, everyone has their own naming conventions and how they want to structure tags. For instance, what I'm going to do is have a header tag, so I'll just put in header. And inside my header, I want the navigation and the showcase. I want this whole area to be the header. But it's fine if you would have just this inside the header tag and then maybe have section for this. You're going to see different styles when you're looking at different HTML, and you're going to develop your own style. What I do here is just what I like to do, okay? And I like to think that it's okay, and hopefully you guys don't mind the way that I do things, but I just want to make it clear that every developer has their own style of doing things, and not just HTML, any kind of programming, anything like that. So like I said, I want the nav bar in here, so I'm going to create a nav tag, and I'm actually going to give this an ID of navbar. And inside the nav bar, we're going to have the logo, okay, this right here, which is just an H1, and then we're going to have our navigation, which is our unordered list. So let's put an H1, which I'm actually going to give a class of logo. And that's another thing that is different depending on the developer is how you use IDs and classes. I could easily call this a class and this an ID. That's fine. The one major rule that I would say you should never break is don't have more than one ID. Like, don't have another ID of navbar on the same page. But I mean, some people will use just classes. I tend to use IDs for stuff that I won't have duplicates of and that kind of surround everything else, that they're parents of other things. For instance, we have the H1 and the UL in here. The nav surrounds them, so I'm going to use an ID here. So for the logo, we're just going to do HBT. And usually you'll have your logo go to your home page. Like you'll see if I hover over it, it's a link and it goes back to the home page. So if I'm on About and I click that, it'll take me back. So we want to surround this in an A tag, and we want this to go to index.html. All right, make sure that your closing A tag is on the other side of the HBT. All right, I'm just going to close this sidebar up to give me some more room as well. Okay, so that's our H1. Now we want the UL right here. So let's do UL list item, and then in each list item we'll have a link. This is going to go to index.html, and this is going to be our home page. I'm going to do Control Option down or Control Alt down on a Windows machine, and let's do about, and let's say about.html, contact. Okay, so there's our navbar. Now let's open this in Live Server, and it's going to look horrible because we have no CSS. So that's what we're going to do now, is we're going to jump to the CSS. Okay, and that's another thing that varies, is sometimes you might do all of your HTML on the whole page and then start your CSS, or you can do what we're going to do and go by basically component by component. So the navbar, then we'll move to the showcase, then to this part, that part, and so on. So let's jump into style.css. And in addition to the navbar styling, I want to do just some of the core basic styling, like the body tag and stuff like that. So I am going to add a CSS reset. So I'm going to put an asterisk here, which means we're grabbing everything, and we're going to clear out the margin and padding. Okay, the default margin and padding that the browser puts on a lot of different elements. As soon as I save that, you'll see that it changes. Okay, the UL, the heading, that stuff, the margin goes away. And then I also want to add a box sizing property. Oops. And we're going to set that to border box, because when we have boxes that have padding like this right here, I don't want the padding to add to the actual width of the box. Okay, so that's pretty important. So next we'll have our main styling, and what I mean by main is just like core elements like the body, links, headings, paragraph, all that stuff. Okay, anything that really doesn't have a class or an ID. So for the body, and a lot of times when you style the body, you'll put in the HTML as well. So HTML body, and then I'm just going to set the font family to, I'm going to use one of these presets for VS Code. We'll use this Segu UI to Homa Geneva. And then let's set the line height to, I'm going to set it kind of high, so 1.7 em. And now that I saved, you can see that there's a little more spacing in between the lines. Okay, next thing we'll do is the links. I want all links by default, unless the class or ID specifies otherwise, I want them to have a color of 333. And I also want to remove the underline, so we'll do text decoration none, and we'll save that. Okay, also the headings, so I'm going to say H1, H2, H3. I want spacing underneath, so if we look at our final project, so like right here, you can see the spacing here. Because we remove the default margin and padding, there's not going to be any spacing, so we need to add that ourselves. So I'm actually going to do padding bottom 20 pixels. Okay, and then for paragraphs, remember paragraphs by default have a margin, but we just removed it with the reset, so I'm just going to re-add 10 pixel margin on the top and bottom. Okay, remember if we do it this way, this is top and bottom, this is left and right. So those are the core styles. Now let's move on to the actual navbar. So what was it, an ID? Yeah, so we did ID navbar. Let's put a comment in here just to kind of organize things. And we'll say navbar. I'm going to set the background color or background to 333. I'm going to set the color to white. And let's see, what else are we going to do? Let's do an overflow auto so that the background shows no matter what. And we'll save that. And notice that we can't read the text, even though we put color here, because all the text, it's all links. And if you have links, you have to add the color specifically to those links. So remember, we have a logo. So I'm going to do navbar class logo. I want to style that link, and then any other links in the navbar. So let's do comma navbar. Actually, you know what? We'll just do navbar A. There's no need to do that. And let's say color white and save, and now we can actually see the text. So let's see, next thing we want to do is align the logo to the left, and we want the UL to be on the right. So let's add some floats for that. And I would recommend using something like Flexbox, but we haven't gotten to that yet, so we're just going to use floats. So let's grab the navbar H1, and let's do float left. I'm also going to add some padding to the top to push it down a little bit. Let's do 20 pixels. Okay, we'll save that. Now the UL, we also want to float that. We want to float that to the right. So let's say navbar UL. We're going to do a couple other things too. We want to remove the bullets. So let's say list style none. And we'll set the margin to 0. Padding, actually we don't have to do that because we added the reset. So let's just do float right and save. And now that's floated over to the right. So the list items right now are going vertical. We want them to go horizontal. So let's grab onto those. We'll say navbar ul li, or you could just do navbar li. It's up to you. I like to just keep it kind of organized like that. So for the list items, we want to float them all to the left and save. And then everything else that we style as far as these links it's going to be on the A tag inside. So let's do that. Let's say navbar ul li a, and we want to display them as blocks, okay, so that we can add padding, and we want to do 20 pixels all around. Okay, if I save that, it kind of pushes them right into place. We got 20 pixels all around. Let's make sure they're aligned centered, so we'll say text align center. And what else do we want to do? I think that's it. Now I do want to have a hover state. Right now if I hover over them, nothing happens. So what we can do is take this and just add our pseudo selector of hover, so :hover, and I'm going to say background. Let's do 444, and let's also make the color a hexadecimal of F. Let's do F7C08A, which is this light brownish tannish color. So now if I hover over it, it looks like that. Now another thing I want to do is, depending on the page we're on, I want it to have that effect as well. If we look at the final project, you can see that the home page has that effect. So what we can do is, whatever page we're on in the nav bar here, we can add a special class, and we're going to add it to the link, to the A tags. So since we're on the home page here, let's say class equals, and let's call this current. Okay, so we'll go back, and then I want it to have this same styling. There's no sense in recreating it. Let's just put a comma so that it affects both, and we'll grab this and then just add the class of current. Okay, and you usually want to put this on a new line just to keep it clean, and save. And now notice the home page has that. Now before we move on, I just want to show you one thing. If we stretch this out really far, it's always on the very edge here, and I don't want that. Usually what you'll do is you'll have a container and move it into the middle. Okay, and we don't want to wrap a container around everything, because then the black bar will actually get pushed to the middle. I want the black bar to go all the way across, but I want this stuff to be in the middle. So to do that, what we'll do is add a container class within the nav, because remember, the ID navbar is where that background is. So within that, we want to have a container class, and we want to move the H1 and the UL into that class, and save, and then we'll style it. So let's add the container. I'm actually going to put the container up top because it's kind of a utility class, meaning you can use it all around. So let's put a comment here and say, we'll just say utilities, or utility classes. And we'll do container. So remember, margin auto, I want to do that. That's going to push it all to the middle, but we need to have some kind of width. So for the width, we want to use max width because we want it to be somewhat responsive as we can make it without going into stuff we haven't talked about yet, like media queries. And we're going to set that to 1100 pixels. That'll be the max width. All right, and then let's see, let's add an overflow auto just so it always shows the background, doesn't go outside of it. And then some padding. I want to do padding. Let's do 0 top and bottom, and I just want left and right to have 20 pixels padding. So let's save that, and notice that now it's not right up against the edge, and if I bring the browser out, it's right when it hits 1100 pixels, it stops. Okay, that's the max width. and yet the black bar is still goes all the way across. Now I just want to show you something, and you guys don't have to do this, but if we had the container on the outside of the nav bar, okay, so have that, and then the div, the ending div for the container outside of the nav bar, and save. Now the background doesn't reach all the way across because it's restricted inside the container. Okay, and I don't like the way that that looks. I mean, websites from like, you know, like the early 2000s looked like that, where everything was in this container, and then you had some like funky background over here. Nowadays, you want your backgrounds to extend all the way across, and you want to just put your content inside containers. Okay, and that's another reason why it's a class and not an ID, is because we're going to be using this container class throughout the site. All right, so let's just bring that back how it was. That, oops, and there we go. Okay, so that's it. That's our nav bar. So in the next video, we're going to start on the showcase area right here.